I wish that I had a purple or lavender oil stick. Alas, I do not. I'm going to have to put out a serious search for that. All right, I have some kind of strange malfunctioning iPad over here. Whew, it has been a day, folks. I'll tell you about it in just a minute. At the moment, though, let's just get a little bit of painting done. I have nerve to call this painting, don't I? All right, forgive me just a second. Let me try this again. I don't know why my iPad monitor is turning off on me. All right, hello, thank you for joining me. My name is Dan. This is Daily Art Adventure number, can you see it? Barely, huh? 852. That was a lot. That was a bad clap. Second oil glaze and dark details. All right, before I go any further, let me give you the bad news. About 2 hours ago, hour and a half ago, long story, I won't give it to you, but I sprained my ankle. Out and about in town, doing my business, jogging, anyway. Just stepped on a rock and sprained my ankle, so I've been sitting on I've been laying on the couch with my foot elevated on ice for the last couple hours. But alas, I absolutely must get this painting painted. Sure am. Hello, Treadfall. Happy Friday to you. Way to go, being the first one to say hi. All right, so I have been broadcasting this painting pretty much from beginning to end. So if you want to see me and hear me paint everything up to this point, you're welcome to do that. Yesterday, I spent quite a bit of time doing the fuzz layer. Well, first of all, oil glaze and then a fuzz layer. Hello, Barbara. And it's all dry, of course, except for the oil stick that I just put on there. And now I'm going to do another glaze. Why do and for you new people, why did I do that? Well, in a minute, after I brush liquid with different tints over the whole painting, if I rub an area hard enough, this will just turn into a faint glow of red, okay? If I don't rub it very much, you'll be able to see very faintly, you'll still be able to see the mark, the line. So that answers part of the question. Those marks so at the moment look so outrageous and brave are really not quite as brave as they look. But they will add to my painting these subtle, magical, abstract touches that you can't make up on purpose. You just have to throw stuff around, hang on, and let it happen. I want a little bit more blue down here. Oh, sure, blue up there too. Anyway, so it did take me a while, has taken me a while to get to the point where I'm this brave, and then I used also, some watercolor pencil, which likewise, as soon as I rub liquid, now this is a lot harder than the oil, so this sticks a lot better. I would have to rub this a lot harder to get it to disappear. Anyway, I digress. Let's just start painting. So I am setting, Edward asks the question, oh, in my iPad is something, okay, tell you what, gang, here's what I'm going to try rebooting my iPad. I am so sorry about that. But without it, I can't see read your comments. They come and they last on my phone monitor for about 3 seconds or 4 seconds. So if I catch them, great. Anyway, so as you know, sometimes the answer with electronics is just a reboot. So let's see if that works here. So I'm painting with a sprained ankle. I'm sitting on a stool. I cannot stand up. This is a second oil glaze, and I ended yesterday's broadcast with this. I'll start it today. Whenever I do an oil glaze, this is what I tell my students to do. You put your finger on your chin, like this. That part's optional, but this part is not optional. You say, I like it pretty much. I just wish it was more blank, and the blank is a color, or a negative, an anti-color. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go, I like it pretty much, which is true. I do like it quite well. But it's too green. It's a little bit too bland, which is a soft, but that's no problem. That's going to get fixed in a minute. But it's a little too greenish bluish. Now, I love the blue that's in here, but I'm not crazy. Anyway, so that means I'm going to anti-green it, which is what? Red, right? Or in this case, violet, red and violet. I'm just read it now. I'm just trying to decide exactly where to start. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to do red over the whole thing. No. It's not that green. Just needs a little bit more red. I'm going to start as I often do. My most common go-to color is oxide red. And this time I'm going to add a little bit of Indian yellow to it. Okay, let's see if let me get my iPad up and running here again. I hope it's nothing serious. I tell you, that would be a severe blow. All right, so I've got, there, yeah, that's pretty good. Again, so any newcomers here, look, much of that red just disappeared because I rubbed it pretty vigorously. Now I have a pencil line right here. So if I rub like that, now even the pencil line has disappeared. Okay, but I don't want to do that generally. I want little ghosts of those marks to persist, just to stay visible. Okay, and some of you may be mildly confused because I said I was going to anti-green it, which I am, but here I am doing warm reddish orange yellow. Well, that's because this part needed to be warmed up, but more of the painting needs to be cooled, needs to be blued and redded. I'm really glad I've got a good easel, since I am unable to move. Forgive me, still wrestling with my iPad. Let's see if we can get it going. Sorry to waste your time like this. All right, so Treadfall, Barbara, and Edward have spoken. Edward asked a question. Hey, Dan, question. Oh, no. My iPad just turned off, right? That's how far I got, Edward. Oh, gracious. That disturbs me quite considerably. Okay, now I'm doing, again, and I tell you these colors just for interest's sake, not for taking notes. You know, don't grab your clipboard or anything and say, oh, write that down. No. This is not a write that down moment. When I'm telling you, almost always when I'm telling you colors, that is not a moment for you to, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking too much like myself, like the person that I am, because I've been me my whole life. I don't know about you. But generally speaking, I don't think students, they should not learn color by recipe. I guess maybe there's a season early in their journey, maybe. I mean, reluctant even to admit it, when students should learn recipes, maybe. But that season should be so short, I promise. Why? The reason is you should be learning color by eyeball, not by, okay, now I'm doing permanent rose. And again, don't write that down. You should do color by eyeball, not by, it's a right brain thing, not a left brain thing. It's not a linguistic, take the note, write down the right word, write down the right color. I mean, I'm sorry, maybe I might be overly harsh here, but it's because I'm a pretty good teacher, and I am alarmed, always alarmed, whenever I see students, my fellow students, say, oh, write that down. You learn how to mix colors by mixing colors with your eyeballs, not by recipe. All right. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe. All right, now let's see. Edward says, if you do underpainting acrylics and cover with oil, do you have to save painting? Oh, no. I do not. If a person is interested, I'm delighted to tell them that it's acrylic underneath and oil on top. But by the time I'm finished, well, first of all, I do a glaze over the entire canvas, so there's no acrylic peeking through. Fair enough. So that one factor makes me feel quite comfortable that I don't have to call it mixed media. I'm happy. I'm not hiding anything. I'm delighted to tell people my formula. But no, I don't call it mixed media at all. Okay, so what you've just seen me do here in the last several minutes is a bunch of pink. By the way, I am gaga over permanent rose. Permanent rose as a glaze color. It's almost a rule, a guideline, a practice. Almost rises to the level of rule that every painting, so take this with a grain of salt, you know what I mean? Every painting should have some permanent rose glaze, transparent, should have some transparent permanent rose in it somewhere. That's almost a rule. Permanent rose looks so good. It is such a delicious color. I will tell you that probably about 90% of my paintings do have, in fact, an intentional layer, if you will, of permanent rose in them somewhere. Transparent. Now, okay, for anybody new watching, that doesn't mean you run to the store and look for a tube of transparent permanent rose. It is all transparent, by the way. But no, I'm talking about when I talk about painting in transparent layers, I'm not making reference to the little symbol on the side of your tube of paint. No, all my paints are rendered transparent by use of mediums like liquid or Neil McGilp. But right now, I am anti-greening my painting. And I'm already considerably happier with it. I started out by doing very warm stuff here, but very quickly I moved to blue, then purple, then permanent rose. I'm back now. I've got some dioxazine violet. Don't rush for your notebook. Your eyeballs would tell you what color to use. Let me go back to that rant I had for a minute about learning. Maybe, and I may be all wet. I might be completely wrong about this. It may be that most people do need to learn to paint, learn colors by recipe. I really hope this is not the case. I really do. And I think it's not. I think it might be like the difference between somebody learning how to cook from a Betty Crocker cookbook. We used to have cookbooks, by the way. I know we still do, but learning how to cook by a cookbook versus learning how to be a chef, maybe. Maybe that's a parallel. I want you guys to be artists. I don't want you to be cooks. I want you to be chefs. And a chef doesn't learn by recipe. A chef learns by, and I'm not a chef, but a good chef learns by tasting, not by imitating, mimicking, mocking other chefs. He doesn't pick up a cookbook to learn how to cook, whatever. Okay, I'm so far out of my comfort zone, it's not even funny, so forgive me if I've just said something horribly untrue. That's my impression. That is that is my impression. I learned everything I know from a couple movies that are about cooking. Not the least of which is Ratatouille. If you have any kids, you don't need kids, but if you need it, if you don't need an excuse to watch a animated movie, then by all means, please watch Ratatouille. Brilliant movie. I'm a sucker for all those animated movies anyway, as you can imagine, because I'm an artist, visual artist, drawing artist. Those animated movies are very heavy in drawing skill. Anyway, let's get off that subject. So I am now, the next step after a glazing is pretty much always removing some of the glaze. So lightening back to painting in the negative, that is by removing paint. I use that term, painting in the negative, in two different ways. I know that's confusing. I need to come up with different. Painting in the negative means painting around an object and rendering the object by painting around it. I call that negative painting. But I also call taking paint off negative. So sorry about the confusion. All right, now I can't stand up and back up. So let me pause just a second here and lean back and say, yes, the painting is better already. It's darker. The colors are richer. And it's less green. I like the overall cast of the painting, of the canvas, a little bit better. Now, I have at least, 4 more layers to go. Dark details in paint, dark details in pencil, then that'll be today. Then tomorrow I'll do final edit and broken color and sparkle. I wish, so that's the hard part about doing a live painting. I'm going to finish this at an event, at a function tomorrow. And I want it so that I can finish it in about 4 hours tomorrow. So I'm close to that point. You could see, honestly, I could sign the painting and call it done right now, and nobody would be the wiser. Correct? Correct. Well, you guys would, because you know what my stuff's supposed to look like. What I mean is, anybody that didn't know my artwork wouldn't bat an eye if I said it was finished. Once again, my iPad is jinxed. It alarms me considerably. All right, now, the next step, and I don't obligate myself, by the way, especially being crippled as I am today, I do not obligate myself to broadcast the entire thing. But the next step in my process is dark details. And I decided to do the paint first and then pencil second, because there's already a fair amount of pencil that is still visible. I'm going to do something inadvisable and prop up my reference against my painting there. Hang on, I'm trying to get my iPad. I unplugged it to see if by any chance the power cord was messing with it. Yesterday, when I was painting, I said something I've never said before, and I want to revisit it because it dawned on me that it was a good way to describe my painting process. And indeed, we're seeing it evidenced right now in what I'm doing, okay? At the end of yesterday's painting session, no, let me back up. At the end of 2 days ago, my painting was too light, too bright, too pale. No, sorry. Let me say that again, forgive me. At the end of it's my double dose of ibuprofen is working on my brain maybe. 2 days ago when I finished, the painting was too dark. Check, that is correct. A little bit, the overall cast of the canvas was a little bit too dark. At the end of yesterday's painting, what you saw a few minutes ago, my painting is too light. At the end of this stage of the painting process, once again, my painting will be too dark. Now, it's not just dark and light. There's actually a number of other polarities, binaries, if you will. And my paintings typically bounce between a number of polarities. Let me give you another one. A polarity is yin-yang, A, B, B, C, north-south. When there's two options. You know, binaries binary language has fallen on very hard times in the philosophical community in the last several years. Anybody who says there are two kinds of people in the world. Let me finish that, by the way. There are two kinds, just for fun. There's two kinds of people in the world. They are those who believe there are two kinds of people in the world and those who don't. Little philosophical humor there for you, just in case you need something. So let me repeat what I said. My paintings pendulate. I don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean, don't you? My paintings swing between two poles, but a whole bunch of two poles. My paintings swing between too light, too dark. At the end of Wednesday's painting, this painting had too many hard edges. At the end of yesterday's session, it has too many soft edges. At the end of today's session, it will have too many hard edges. But even though it's swinging back and forth like this, each swing of the pendulum goes not quite as far as the one before. So when I'm done, hopefully, boom, I land with a perfect balance right in the middle. I've never described my painting in those terms before, but it came back to me in the last day or so, and I thought that's a good way to describe my painting process. And it's related to another principle that I have stated very often, and I think it should be instructive for many artists, and it's this, because I see this weakness in my fellow artists sometimes. Far be it from me. Sorry. Far be it from me not to tell you the weaknesses of my fellow artists. If I see weakness in somebody else, by golly, I'm going to tell you guys about it. I hope you think that's funny, because I'm being funny. Anyway, I do see this tendency, and it is a tendency to a reluctance. Now, I think there's got to be a better way to say this. I'll say all of us, I'll put myself in this camp. Many of us, most of us, at some point, we are reluctant to allow our painting to go through an ugly stage, knowing it'll come back, but we don't want to leave it here because it makes us nervous. And I think, for me at least, growing as an artist, one of the things that has grown in me is the contentment, the relax, cool it, don't worry about it. Let it go, you know. Let it be too dark, let it be too light, let it be too dark again, then too light. Let it be too too hard, let it be too soft, let it be too warm, let it be too cool, and being comfortable with all those extremes. I think somehow, I think it's because we're nervous. We're not afraid that everything's going to turn out all right. Every little thing going to be all right. Bob Marley, thank you very much. Every little thing going to be all right. We don't believe that, so we're nervous, and it keeps us from being good painters, because we demand that an unfinished painting stand up and walk on its own hind legs, to use a silly word picture analogy. Does that make sense? We're reluctant, so we paint in a timid manner because we're uncomfortable letting something be temporarily out of balance. So there you go. I have used different words, but I've spoken about that quite a bit. And now I'm just saying the same thing really in different words, that my paintings pendulate. If that is a word, it ought to be a word. Doggone it. One of you can tell me if that's a word. Okay, but don't bother, because my iPad is not working. I'm going to start my iPad again, y'all. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. This would not be a happy moment if I lose my monitor with you guys. I'll go back to what I said when I first started, before I started this afternoon, just a few minutes ago. My painting was, it was too green, so I've anti-greened it, a lot of red and purple everywhere. I also do warm here in the middle. And it was also too pale. And I have largely remedied both of those problems in the few minutes I've been painting. And I'm especially tickled with the progress, what is appearing here before me. I'm painting right now, and I say this just for interest's sake, not so that you can run for your notebook and say, write that down. I'm painting right now with a dirty purple. One of my favorite expressions, as you regulars well know. So it's a dioxide. It's transparent, of course. Now that goes without saying. If it's dark, it's dark, it's transparent, and if it's transparent, it's dark. I know I don't need to keep saying that, but I do, because we have new people that will watch this. Okay, you get dark with transparents and light with opaques. And it's one of the cardinal rules of Dan Nelson's School of Art. And as I've said before, there are artists who are better than I am who don't follow that rule. Well, intentionally, assiduously, they don't follow it. Most of the time, most artists do follow it, but not with clear awareness. And they might be better than me, more famous than me, more rich than me. So I'm not saying I am better than them, but I will emphatically say they would be better than they are if they practiced this principle. What principle? I'll say it again. You get dark with transparent colors and light with opaque. If you want to see a fuller description of that, you're on my YouTube channel right now. You just do a search for Dan Nelson Mud. Not Dan Nelson's name is Mud. No. Just Dan Nelson and Mud. I've got an 11-minute video where I explicate this principle quite clearly and demonstrate it also, I think, quite clearly. That hasn't kept some people from arguing with me, but they're really bad painters. So we only treat them with so much weight. We only give much weight to their words. That was really nasty, by the way. That's me being nasty because I've got a sprained ankle. If that's true, then what's my excuse? all the other days, right? So let me go back to what color is on my brushes. And I don't know if you can tell or not, you probably can. Here's my reference photo. My head is bouncing up and down like a bobblehead, because even at this late stage of the painting process, I'm looking pretty carefully at my reference with each layer of my painting process. So this is another layer, you understand. With each layer, my hope, my goal is to get just a little bit more accurate, a little bit more realistic. A little more accurate is really a better word than realistic. And at the same time, I want all of my marks to be energetic. And let me make just a comment. So why am I using dirty purple? By the way, in fact, now's a good time to switch right now. I'm going to add some permanent rose to that. So it's now I've got a dirty, really dirty plum color, redder than what I have, simply for variety, simply because I want a variety of colors. One of the principles you do want to capture here is, whenever possible, and you're doing dark details in paint, whenever possible, you want to draw with a colored paint instead of neutral. And that's some progress for me. I used to use a lot of dark black. That's my word, B-L-E-C-K, black. That means a neutral gray, dark neutral gray. Sometimes a cool gray, sometimes a warm gray, but a dark middle. And I am not liking that color on that building, so I'm going to pick up some phthalo blue. And folks, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get my iPad to cooperate. It comes on for a few seconds and then turns off. Not a happy moment. Let's see if I can read your comments before they disappear. Barbara, I'm going to take a stool with me. I'm going to hopefully get my son-in-law to go and help me. Oh, it just turned off. I was scrolling down. Oh, you guys, I've got two things hitting me today. All right. Here's a tall building. Up until this moment, I've not counted, or I've not tried really hard to get the right number of striations, the right number of stories. But now it's time, and I'm just going to count. So how many dark lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a half. Okay, I've got way more than that. So now is the time that I want to start getting, and that's too dark, hang on a second. I want to start getting, correcting the drawing. I want to make a point here, and I tried to make the point, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I think it was the day before. In the underpainting stage, I know the sound, please listen if you're new. Not only am I not careful to get the right number, I'm actually a little bit careful to make sure I get the wrong number. When I have a repeated pattern like staves or pickets in a picket fence, or staves and a porch railing, or in this case, stories. In the underpainting, I would rather have the wrong number. And that is so counterintuitive. Don't look at me like that, like I'm being silly. I say that to my students all the time when I'm teaching, because they look at me as if, oh yes, I knew that. That's what I do all the time. Because I know it's not. Because I know inside you're going, what? What? That's crazy. Okay. Okay, let me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And by the way, 9 versus 10 is close enough. In my planet, the planet I live on, that is close enough. and that might drive some of you crazy, it has to look like this building in my book. It doesn't have to have exactly the right number of stories. It just has to look as though it has the right number of stories, which means the density of these striations, the density of these stories, marks, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, the density needs to read accurate, and it looks to me like right now it will. All right, now let me go back to what I said just a minute ago. Not only am I not terribly careful to get the right number in the underpaintings, I actually throw a little bit of chaos into my painting to make sure that I don't get the right number. And again, that should be shocking to some of you. So let me explain now why. Why in the world would I do that? Well, it's related to the principle that I speak often, that in the underpainting stages, I want to create adequate or sufficient chaos so that I have lots to respond to in the final edit layer. Let me count this again now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to keep going. I think it's right. All right, so it's close enough. I think it's close enough. Why do I want the wrong number? Because, well, let me say it this way. It's easiest to describe the other way around. Let's imagine for a moment that in my many layers of underpainting, I accidentally, which does happen sometimes, I accidentally end up with the correct number of, in this case, stories. What does that mean? In the final layer, what am I going to do? Am I going to, in the final edit layer, am I going to intentionally mess up? Of course not. The final edit layer is for correcting mistakes. But if the underpainting is already laid out perfectly exactly, then what's going to happen? Then the overpainting, if I can call it that, is going to line up exactly with the underpainting, right? Which is what? Boredom. It will be pedantic, predictable, whereas if there's a jitter, if there's a moire pattern happening between layers, I get a vibration. And the result is that it actually ends up looking more like the real building than if I did it right. Why? Because in reality, and I can't, all these windows, these are all people's offices or apartments, I don't know which, right? And some people have their shades drawn, other people have their shades open, some people have, there's all different kinds of things happening in each floor. Do you understand? So that some of the windows appear light and some appear dark. I'm not going to go in there and start painting, oh, stick out my tongue, there's a light window, and there's a dark one, and there's a light one. That's absurd. That is way beyond any kind of painting I'm interested in, unless I'm doing a super realistic painting just for fun, which I do occasionally, just for fun. So I just answered the question, right? If you're paying attention, you got it. Because I get a natural moire pattern, light, dark, I get a interplay of stuff that actually ends up being more realistic than if I got the right number all the way along. Whew. That was a lot of words. I really hope you caught it, because that is a pretty helpful little tip for some of you. Do take notes on that. I'm kidding. Don't even take notes on that. Just absorb this stuff in your inner psyche. Lord willing, I'll be here for a while. Lord willing, my sprained ankle doesn't end up being fatal. I am not felled by the mighty corona. I'm sorry, I'm being facetious. And if some of you are felled by the mighty corona, I will feel very, very bad that I just said that. I'm sorry, and I'm laughing. You can tell how bad I feel because I'm laughing. It's serious, believe me, I know it's serious. But I don't know, now I'm tempted to get into invisible realities with you. I will tell you this much. What's the one single worst thing we could do about the coronavirus? Scream! Ah! Get fearful. Get fearful. That's as, that's as, that's as far as I'm going to go with that. Maybe. All right, so I now have the right number, right? And that's about the fourth or fifth time or sixth time that I've drawn the number of stories on that building. And I have no idea how many times I've got the right number, how many times I've got the wrong number. I'm pretty sure it's more times wrong than right. And I'm not done yet. My last opportunity to get the number right is in the final edit layer. The final edit, just like it sounds, is the layer in which I correct all my mistakes. That's a good way to put it. And if you don't have any mistakes to correct, then you have one heck of a boring painting. Which again gets to my definition of good painting, and or, if you will, definition of not so good painting. Let me give it to you again. Oh, it's been a long time since I waxed eloquent on good painting. I'm being facetious here. But let me tell you what good painting is. Let me tell you what I think not so good painting is. Sometimes the negative is easier to describe than the positive. It's called via negativa, by the way. It has a long and illustrious history in philosophy and theology. Via negativa, the way of negativity. And it's not a negative thing. It's a way to describe something positive by describing what it ain't. So let me tell you what I think the best paintings in the world are not. The best paintings in the world are not ones which the entire canvas is filled with the iron will of the artist. Hey baby, here comes my wife finally home. She knew I was mortally wounded, but don't worry, she rushed home 3 hours after I told her about my grave injuries. Love you, baby. Thanks for coming home and saving me. You should have seen it when I came in. I was a pretty sorry sight. It really was. It's a second-degree sprain at least. I'm an old runner, and this is not a Saturday morning sprain. This is a pretty good one anyway. And so I was limping. I was walking extremely gingerly, and I dumped on the couch and said to my daughter, Alicia, I need your nursing. So I lay down, and she went and got me different things, wraps and cold packs. And anyway, our little niece and nephew, no, I don't mean that, our little nieces, Lake and Tolly, they are 7 and 5 respectively. Oh, they were so cute. They just had a look of compassion and concern. It broke my heart. And they turned into little nurses, and they ran and got me pillows and a stool to put got me water and put it on a stool. They went and got me a bowl of chips, potato chips, and hovered over me with frumpled brows. Oh my goodness, I forgot all my woes. I was too busy. My heart was too busy melting at the overwhelming cuteness. Oh, it was precious. Okay, back to art. And back to my wife. My wife walked back out of the house. She was insulted by what I just said about her. Either that or she went out to get a second load of groceries. Anyway, can you get drunk on 2 ibuprofen? I don't think you can you? I don't think that's my problem. All right. All right, via negativa, I was going to describe for you what I think is not the best art in the world. It can be impressive, darn impressive, and I enjoy it to a degree, but it's basically hyper-realistic stuff. A painting in which everything on the finished canvas is a product of the intentional will, and as I like to say, iron will of the artist. Everything was put there on purpose by the artist. Believe me, I have a long and decades-long history of painting in that manner. That's why part of the reason why I have now the zeal of a convert, because it took me a long time to learn that was not the kind of art that produced the highest degree of aesthetic pleasure in the viewer. Let me see if I can get my iPad going again. I'm going to try it one more time. Well, then what is the affirmative? What is the if that's the negative, what's the positive? So glad you asked. Here it is. The best paintings in the world are ones that are a cooperation between the iron will, if I'll use that term, the iron will of the painter and the vicissitudes of life, the accidents of nature, things that happen without the artist's will. And again, I've said often that Bob Ross's best line is "happy little accidents." And I mentioned this the other day, that one of the biggest turning points in my art career when I switched, and I was switching from first half of my art journey to the second half, which is about 15 and a half years ago, is when I discovered, really deep in my gut, in my heart of hearts, and deep in my soul, I discovered that the best stuff happened on my canvas when I was trying hard to do something else. That's when good things really happened. And that's when I started then painting something else all the time. So that's why you see me painting sort of just over the edge of self-control almost all the time. Now, the highest degree of control in my painting, of course, is during the final edit layer. And then I am Mr. Tidy. Then I am definitely, but even in that season, my primary objective is not realism, but is interesting marks. And I've just recently done a couple broadcasts on what do I mean by interesting marks. I did one just this past week, I think, and I ended up not talking as much as I thought I would, but I nevertheless demonstrated throughout the whole thing in the final edit layer what I mean by quote-unquote interesting marks. So let me finish that thought just a little bit about the best painting in the world has magic in it, and I don't want to freak anybody out here, and if you're triggered by such language, I do apologize, but I'm not going to unsay it. The best paintings in the world have a transcendence about them that defy analysis. And I think in our gut, we all know that's true. That when you look at a truly inspiring painting, one that drops your jaw, one that makes you tear up, inexplicable, truly inexplicable. You go, I don't know why this moves me so deeply. All I can say is it does. In my opinion, those paintings are the ones where the artist was not in iron will control mode. They allowed magic to happen, to appear on the canvas outside of their iron will. And again, I hope as I say this that you go, oh, well, that explains why you paint the way you do, right? That is correct. If that makes sense to you, then my painting. Once I learned, my mom said about me one time when I was a young man, and she was a rare moment that she was reflecting on me and in my hearing. She said, well, one thing about Dan, once he knows the right thing to do, he does it. And she was not one to freely, neither of my parents were, to freely dish out vacuous praise. And she wasn't praising me. She wasn't even talking to me. She was just talking about me to somebody else. She said, one thing about Dan, when he knows the right thing to do, he does it. And I think that's a pretty good description. So it's once I realized the superiority of, I'm going to use the word transcendent painting as opposed to controlled painting, then my painting switched almost literally overnight. Almost literally overnight. because in a sense, I already had all the tools from decades of being a realistic painter. In a sense, I already had, not as many as I have now, but I had all the tools I needed at the moment to turn a corner and begin painting in an accidental manner instead of an intentional manner. What I mean by that is the best painting happens, best marks happen by accident. So that's, again, if you understand that, then you go, oh, well, that explains why you paint the way you do. Because so much of what I do is geared toward throwing chaos onto the canvas. I don't even have to defend that, do I? If you follow me, you know it's true. Still wrestling with my iPad, and I'm getting more anxious about it by the minute. This would be a severe loss. Let me, again, I'm sounding awfully. Do you want to have supper soon, sweetie?
Nope.
Okay.
In a little while.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, I just started painting. I was been lying on the couch till 30 minutes ago or so. So I'm not in a hurry either. Just started broadcasting.
I saw you had a nibble.
Yeah, the girls brought me potato chips and water. They were so cute. They wanted to nurse me.
Get used to it.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to use some other descriptor for my painting process, and now it slipped from my mind. It'll come back to me, especially if it was good. It'll come back to me. Well, I'll go on a tangent, perhaps. Again, first half of our journey, in ideal world, the first half of our art journey, I think we're learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Second half of our art journey, we're learning to paint stuff that looks like paint. Kind of a cute way, of course, I'm playing with words, so it's memorable. A cute way of saying we switch from literal to abstract. For me, every painting, and I do abstracts for fun sometimes too, of course, but every representational painting is a thinly veiled excuse for line, shape, color, design, value, texture. Again, I don't know if I got them all, but the principles, the elements, I should say the elements of design. What do I care about on this canvas? Color, texture, light, shape, line. Oh, and do I want you to see the skyline of Raleigh? Oh, absolutely. Yes, of course. That's quite clear, quite obvious, isn't it? But that's secondary. That really and truly is secondary. Primary is I want you to, and a real ideal compliment that when I'm painting on the street, I experience this, I get this compliment, not infrequently. It is somebody's walking up the sidewalk, maybe the first time they see me, they're a block and a half away, and they see this guy painting far away. And as they approach, the painting looks very realistic from 40, 30, 20, maybe even 10 paces. And they tell me this. They tell me this was their experience. They say, oh my goodness, when I was standing back there, it looked so real. And yet when I get up close, it's just a bunch of marks, a bunch of blobs of paint. And that is fantastic. One of the best, again, one of the best compliments that you can give me on my painting. Now, as some of you know, you're already way ahead of me. You're going, yeah, but isn't that a relative statement? Absolutely, it certainly is. And some of my paintings end up more tight and more literal, and some less. But the principle is just a matter of scale. Like this is turning out to be, honestly, quite a tight painting. And that's okay. I'm not unhappy about that. Because when you get up close to it, yeah, up close for a minute. When you get up close to it, you go, man, It really is just a hodgepodge of marks. And indeed, it is. Thank you very much. By the way, I've caved in here a little bit now in the last several minutes. I am, in fact, using what I call dark black. Because it's when there are parts of the painting that I really do need to be darker than a blue or a purple can render them. And for that, I will go to a darker color, not black, BLECK, a dark. It's usually a combination of oxide red and ultramarine, although I have a bunch of other stuff on my brushes just because I'm not cleaning them between colors. Does that make sense? Once again, my objective, I'm going to finish this painting tomorrow afternoon at a fundraiser for the Visual Art Exchange. It's an arts organization here in Raleigh. I used to serve on the board. I served on the board for several years, long time ago. And I paint at their fundraiser every year, have done so for 15 or 16 years. I calculate that I've raised about $40,000 for them over the years. And this year I said, okay, I feel like I've paid my dues. This year I would like 50%. And they said, no problem. So I'm going to get 50% of whatever it auctions for. Typical from one of my paintings at this event, typical is somewhere between $1,500 and $4,500. That paintings go, but more around $2,000. So I won't get market value by any means if it goes for that, but it will not, I'm not doing it for nothing, which is kind of nice. And before now, at this event, I have always started with a blank canvas the evening of and finished before the night was over. So it was one of my fast paintings. That's very typical of the kind of thing I've done for the last 15 years, and I've turned a corner now, and my business model, I'm sure I'll do exceptions, but my business model is to no longer do that. My hope is to not produce a painting that's as good as it can be done in 5 hours or 6 hours. My goal is to do as good a painting as I can do and take as much time, but yet at the same time entertain people by painting live. So after today's work, all that will be left tomorrow will be the final edit, which is the slowest, the most painstaking, the most detailed layer of them all. So that's what I'll do live, and I'll have about 4.5 hours, I think, to paint. That's just about enough time to finish the final edit, and then do a layer of broken color, and finally a layer of sparkle. If you don't know what all those mean, then just stick around and you'll see them all eventually. I trust that just with the work, I don't know if you can remember what this painting looked like an hour ago or whenever it was that I started. It looks better now. There's more punch, there's more contrast, and a little bit more detail. Not a lot, but a little bit. It's still got lots of chaos in it. Lots and lots and lots of... Tell you what, let's for fun. Let me pick you up just for a second. And again, I can't see anything that you guys are saying, tragically, because my iPad is, at least at the moment. Let me try one more time. But here, let me pick you up. Forgive me for the earthquake that you're getting. I just want to, just so you can see what I'm seeing, look at texture. Texture is huge for me, huge, huge, huge. Texture and color and abstraction. So I hope you're seeing that, oh yeah, it looks a lot more realistic when you guys, again, forgive me the earthquake that you're getting here. It looks a lot more realistic from back there, correct? But when you see it up close, it's very much a hodgepodge of stuff. All right, let me see how long my iPad stays turned on now. Yes, it will be a live auction. Barbara asks. Thank you, Susan. 3% death rate versus 1%. Nothing to laugh at. I agree. I agree. But I also can affirm, at least in my worldview, that one of the great errors is to fear it. Not cavalier. My wife already ordered face masks, not gas masks, things weeks ago. So that's what she's inclined to do, and I'm inclined to let her. But will not get caved into a panic. Does nobody any good. In fact, does harm. I'm convinced. Even to the people that experience the panic, even if they do get sick or don't get sick. Anyway, sorry, I'm not in a position to lecture, so I won't. But it's just my 2 cents worth, and it may be all that it's worth. But thanks for, 3% death rate instead of, is it one? Susan, I'm surprised that a normal flu is 1%. Is that true? I don't have any reason to question you. I'm just exclaiming, really? Normal flu is 1% fatal. I would have thought it was like, 1/10 of one out of 1,000 die. Maybe 2. Not 10 out of 1,000. Wow. I will not have, I'm happy to say, I'll not have, let's move over here. I have to scooch my stool now. Again, for any of you who may be playing around with imitating my technique a little bit, or some elements of it, understand this, that the more work the more work you put into the underpainting layers, the farther forward you carry the realism in the underpainting, then the less work you have to do in the final edit or overpainting layer. I use the term overpainting even though nobody else does, but because in my world there's such a strong contrast between those two. I don't know if nobody else does, but I don't remember. Anyway, so as you can probably tell, and this is not an accident, because tomorrow when I'm sort of showing off under the gun, under pressure, I really want to have a good painting, and I don't want to run out of time. I don't want to be panicked, near the end when the live auction is coming up, and go, oh no, I'm not done yet. I don't want that feeling. So I have carried, admittedly, I have carried the representationalism. I've carried the detail forward to a considerable degree here. You know what? I have a silly mistake here, and I don't usually advocate correcting your mistakes, but I'm afraid that this one, if I don't do it, I'm just going to be confused. Forgive me. There's this. I just rendered this building poorly. So right at the moment, I'm doing this is opaque color. I'm doing a little bit of final edit right now, because if I don't, I'm afraid that tomorrow I'll completely forget. Now this is fairly typical of the way I paint then. Again, painting on the edge of control or just outside the edge of control means that I do in fact make mistakes like this, because almost at no point in the painting process do I kind of roll up my sleeves and start doing some real careful analytical counting. I paint, fly by the seat of my pants, and hope that it all comes out in the end right layer by layer, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's what we're looking at right there. So I've actually, in the course of flying by the seat of my pants, I have ended up with one too many buildings. There was a building right here that does not exist. So this building comes down farther, trees come up. So I'm making corrections, a little bit late, but not too late. It's too late in the final edit layer to make these kind of corrections, but it's not too late now. All right, back to normal. Let me repeat that because I don't usually point that out. I don't think to. The principle is, the guiding principle, one of the guiding principles for my painting is paint just outside the boundary of in control. Paint slightly out of control the whole time. You can tell because I'm using two hands, because I'm painting fast, because I'm painting side saddle, not like this most of the time. And I'm trusting my eye and my instinct to make corrections layer by layer by layer. So I just made a big correction right there. I had one too many buildings. I just removed it, so now my drawing is much more accurate than it was a few minutes ago. This orange building needed to come down farther. Anyway, the point I want to make is that, yeah, painting in this method leaves me open to the mistake, if you will, of making mistakes. And, uh-oh.
It's UPS, I'll get it.
Okay. And that's a hazard that I'm willing to take. Does that make sense? But some of you might go, wow, that is really weird. And that would be an appropriate response. You're welcome to tell me I'm weird. That's better than sitting there and saying, oh no, that's the way I do it too. If you don't. If you do, great, but great. But I know that what I'm saying is should be somewhat scandalous, if not at least mildly surprising, if not scandalous to you. What? And usually any mistakes that end up remaining in the painting are inconsequential. Honestly, even that mistake was inconsequential. But to me, that was a mistake worth fixing. One extra building. So things weren't hanging together exactly right. I think I was going to start talking a while ago about, again, that's something I've been harping on a lot lately. So I'm going to harp again. The war I have declared inside my own self. Now, it's not a war against anybody else. Just the resolve I've made to not use the term loose painting. Because I believe it's gravely misleading to early journey painters. I think it was definitely misleading to me for decades. When an experienced painter says loose painting, I'm convinced that most young painters, early journey painters, hear that and say, oh, like mildly messy or inaccurate. That's what I'm warring against, is this concept of, oh, it's okay if it's inaccurate. And generally speaking, that is not the case. I really had a moment of revelation about that not too long ago, in the last couple of years. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was looking at other people's artwork, people whose work I admire, and I have my short list that I mention all the time, so I'll just stick with that for the moment. So I'd have to think, oh, Kali Wisson, that's a new one. That's not one that you don't hear me say often. Colley, Colley, Wisson, Whisson. He's Australian, and he's been to Raleigh several times, taught classes. I was never able to afford to take one of his classes. But, okay, so I've added that. That's not unusual. My usual list of suspects are Richard Schmid, Tibor Nagy, what's his name? J. His letter begins with a J. Silly me, I'm forgetting it at the moment. M-A-N-N. That's my, one of my short lists. When I look at artists whose work rocks my socks, knocks me back on my heels, makes me go, wow. One of the features of their work, the artists whose work I admire most, one of the characteristics of their work is that, wow, Jason Mann, Tibor Nagy, extremely energetic strokes, wild and crazy strokes, and yet the effect is startlingly, that's a good way to put it, startlingly accurate or realistic in the drawing sense of the word. And that's good. I've never said it that way. Startlingly, like the marks on the canvas are crazy. Oh, here's another one. Christian Hook. That's a recent one. Christian Hook, British, won the British Portrait, Society, whatever. Likewise, crazy marks, jaw-dropping accuracy. So that revelation that I had some couple of years ago was instrumental in moving me away from the loose painting terminology. I realized, no, that is not what we want. It's not what I want. The artists whose work I admire most, and let me, by the way, let's take a slight detour, because I'm usually ragging on, I'm usually saying bad things. I'm usually saying bad things about realism or hyperrealism. Okay, and again, once again, I speak with the passion of a convert, right? You all understand that principle in human nature, because I used to be one, and then when my eyes were opened and I realized at a deep, deep level that the artwork that moved me most was not the hyper-realistic, but artwork that had a inner conflict between things accurately rendered with energetic stroke. So usually that's what I'm saying, but let me go back, because I do want to be clear here. I do get a degree, and it can be a considerable degree of pleasure from looking at realistic or even hyper-realistic art. I get the same pleasure that everybody else gets. And if you've been with me long enough, you've heard me say, I believe all human beings get a kick. All right, I believe I'm back. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry you guys. All right, I was right in the middle of a sentence saying that I enjoy hyperrealism, superrealism, very real realism as much as anybody. In fact, I contend that all human beings, in fact, in their native state, all human beings get a kick out of seeing something accurately rendered by a fellow human being. All human beings except, though, and I'm not saying they go into regales of ecstasy. No, that's quite the contrary. There's a particular kind of pleasure that we receive from looking at that kind of art. And that applies to everybody except those with an MFA, Master of Fine Arts degree, because they are the chief Kool-Aid drinkers among us. They had to buy into a very particular and grumpy worldview, which leaves them no longer able to truly appreciate such things. And anyway, that is essentially correct. But all normal human beings enjoy representational. But let me define that. You do, and you don't have to apologize for enjoying realism. You really don't. I don't apologize for it. All I'd contend is that it's not the highest level of aesthetic pleasure that we can experience, that there is something better than superrealism. And I contend that part of the pleasure that we experience by looking at superrealism is what I call an industrial buzz. That is to say, we're blown away or impressed by the industry, the work. Oh, before I go up there, let's nail down some of these. I've got some cars to do in this street right here, so let's try to get that. And you can tell by the kind of sounds that we make when we observe, when we look at hyper-realistic or very realistic artwork. We say things like, golly. I'm using minced oaths, as they used to be called, to make the point, not to bother my mother who might be watching. Hi, Mom. She doesn't watch very often. I'm kidding this, but anyway, I'm partly kidding. We go, oh, whoa, wow. Okay, those are the kind of vocalizations, roughly speaking, that erupt out of us when we observe. Like, for instance, and the internet has made this kind of art just ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I mean, they're outdoing themselves. The people, and they'll say things like, "It took me 600 hours to draw this eyeball." The eyeball's this big, It took me 600 hours to draw this with a pencil. And what is our proper response? Our proper response is, "Oh my gosh, oh wow," and stuff like that. Wow, wow. Okay, so I contend that all those outbursts, I have a label for them, a name for them. It's not a derogatory term by any means, but it's a defining. It helps clarify the issue. I call that an industrial buzz. What I mean is we are impressed, we are blown away by the industry of the artist. Wow, can you believe how long it took them to do that? Can you believe what attention to detail, what absolute spectacular powers of observation, stuff like that. So that's what we're impressed by, is the industry. And let me tell you, it is perfectly okay to be impressed by the industriousness of our fellow human beings, right? I just say, but it's not the highest aesthetic experience we can have. And I've already said earlier that I think a higher one is when transcendent, accidental, invisible things are manifested or reflected on the canvas. And then that gets us into a whole heavy conversation about beauty, what is beauty, and so on and so forth. And I foolishly, bravely tried to enter into that fray just a few days ago. I don't feel obligated to do so again. But it included words like fleeting glimpses of the eternal and stuff like that. And of course, if I say words like that, then some people are really going to be triggered. So I will have dropped the subject right there. I do not like to have my viewers carried out on a stretcher. because I ventured too far, because I ventured forth too far on philosophical speculation. I like my viewers to be able to walk out under their own steam. Thank you very much. Unlike I'm going to do here in a minute when I'm done painting. All right, I declare myself here officially done with the dark details in paint layer. And I just have a little bit more work to do. And once again, I'm going to try to get my iPad to work. If it has not succeeded yet, so, and insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. I know that. I don't even need to say anything, do I? Since when did that ever stop me? Right, now, I don't need to say anything about the purpose of my pencil marks is twofold. The second or lesser purpose is I use pencils to draw with. That is to say, I use pencils to achieve, or pendles if you prefer, I use pencils to achieve a degree of similitude or realism or accuracy, okay, rendering, drawing. But you can tell, if you're paying any attention, which I'm sure you are, you can tell by the way that I'm handling the pencils, the way that I'm moving, the way that I'm drawing, that that is not my primary concern. If it were, right, I'd be going like this. Right? Which I clearly am not. So you're seeing by that my purpose must be otherwise, which clearly it is. So my primary purpose with the pencils is simply to look to interesting marks, to create a fascinating texture. In this case, interesting line, since obviously it's a liney tool, right? Unapologetically liney. I just thought right there would be kind of fun. There's not one in the photograph, no, but it might be kind of fun to put a crosswalk right there. I am helped in my quest for interesting marks here, you can see right now, by using my non-dominant hand. I am very much a right-handed person, still, even after 12 or 13 years of forced use of my left hand. I'm still prominently, very definitely a right-handed person. So when I use my left hand, you know that I'm very definitely drawing out of the right side of my brain. I'm not sure that's scientifically correct, but it sure does feel like it. My brain feels very different when I use my left hand, especially like this when I use it exclusively. And generally speaking, I can trust my left hand to make interesting marks, whereas my right hand is going to make predictable, controlled, or accurate marks. And so I use them both because both of those kinds of marks are helpful. All right, and then come over here and also you really can draw a little bit faster when you use two hands instead of one. You can make two lines at the same time that it would take normally to make one line. So do the math, right? I've thought this so often over the years while I've been painting live at weddings or any kind of function whatsoever. It's like, oh, you know what? I really couldn't do this fast if I was a one-handed painter. Two-handed paint, and yes, I'm a huge advocate. I think everybody should paint with two hands. I boastfully say, not boastfully, but that pompously say, maybe is a better term, that in 50 years, I think almost all artists will be using two hands. And we will look back on this dismal period of our history when artists thought they could get by with one hand. Why? Everybody you know, this is an exaggeration, everybody you know of that has skill uses two hands. Musicians, basketball players, surgeons, everybody uses two hands. Where in the world did artists get off thinking they could just get by with one? It seems crazy to me. And I was not at all ambidextrous, but now I've had people question my definition of ambidexterity. Doesn't matter. I was not born this way, but I use two hands now, and my left hand has increased in skill considerably. It still doesn't do what my right hand can do, which I wouldn't want it to, but I am a big advocate of using two hands. I started forcing myself to use two hands because I thought it might be a good idea. It turns out it was a spectacular idea. I had no idea when I started how good an idea it was. I started for very flimsy, half-baked reasons, but persisted anyway. And here's the kicker. Even though my left hand, especially when I started, was superbly unskilled, nevertheless, in spite of that, my paintings improved instantly as soon as I engaged my non-dominant hand. It took me about 3 years. I've told this story many times, so I hate to repeat it, but I'd been painting with two hands by force, just by dint of will, for about 3 years to paint with two hands. One day I was painting in downtown Raleigh, I paint there a lot, and I could take you to the very spot where I was standing at the base of this building right here. And all of a sudden, and it was during a festival, there were hundreds or thousands of people milling around and so forth. Right in the middle of it, I discovered, oh my goodness, I've been painting for several minutes here with my left hand and I didn't even realize it. At that moment, I discovered that I had crossed I crossed into the promised land. I had changed, because I could paint with my left hand without anxiety, without forcing myself to. It began to feel natural. It took me 3 years to get there. Now I think if I happen to know, I've talked to doctors and I've researched some, if you or I, if any one of us were to lose our dominant hand, it would not take 3 years. That's some good news. It would not take 3 years for our subdominant hand to catch up. Our brain would rewire much more quickly than that. Of course, I was not under that kind of duress, so my brain took 3 years to get to that point, which I think probably an amputee, say, or a stroke victim would probably take 6 or 10 months maybe to reach that point. It took me 3 years because my right hand, thank God, is still working quite well. Thank you very much. All right, and I see chats going on. I know you guys are having a great conversation. I wish I could be a part of it. I'm going to turn on my iPad one more time and see if I get to see what you're saying. Coming up, let's see how long it lasts here. Barbara and Uncle having a nice conversation. Good for you. Jude Schmid says painting from life. I agree. Painting from life. Good. Thanks for chatting, you guys, especially Barbara and Uncle. Any newcomers here, understand we have ourselves a charming little community. I don't have many viewers, but I have the best ones. Do I get an amen? What we lack in numbers, we more than make up for in quality and personality and humor. Okay, and I'm gonna quit here very shortly. I just reiterate, please understand that everything I'm doing now is all considered underpainting. All of it. This is all underpainting. And one of the goals of the underpainting phase or stage of the painting process is to create enough chaos, my favorite word for it, enough interesting stuff so that when it's time to do the finished overpainting, the final edit layer, I have lots that I can play around with. I don't have to make stuff up out of whole cloth, as the old expression goes. Out of ex nihilo. I don't have to make stuff up out of nothing. There'll be a lot of interesting things on the canvas to which I can respond. And I will be at no shortage of interesting stuff. I'm going to make a few. You can see I'm not being very brave now. Those are very faint lines, but they are lines nonetheless. And some of them will definitely still be visible in the finished painting. I would guess that the sky in this painting is about 75% finished. In other words, not a huge change in the sky from where it is now. Mostly, it'll have more light in it. So at the end, and I'm here now, at the end of this particular day of painting, my painting is slightly, well, too hard edge. I'm not sure that's true. Not sure. It's just about perfect hard soft. It's a tiny bit too dark, which is exactly where I want it. So the pendulum is just a little bit, not like it was earlier this week, way over here too dark. It's just a little bit too dark. The final edit layer will bring it down to, boom, right, perfect in the middle. And it will also be, I will add, of course, broken color and sparkle to it. So I'm looking at it and thinking, can I do that in 4 hours? And yeah, I think I can. I don't think I'll panic, which is good. I will hurry up. I will hurry up, Uncle. I'm just about done. Thank you. Bless your heart. So I don't feel panicked. I feel like it's reasonable to finish this, and I think it's a nice painting. It's too dark right now. That's the only impression I have. I like the color balance, the warm cool, and I think my darks are sufficient. I've got the darks in place, which is one of my objectives at the end of this stage. The only thing it's lacking is pop, sparkle, right, and some broken color. All right, I ramble on long enough. Now it's time to get up on my sprained ankle and hobble to the couch and put ice on it. Thanks, you guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I certainly hope to broadcast tomorrow night. Thanks. Bye-bye.